Operations Committee of the Board of Directors of the Lower Colorado River Authority. Today is Wednesday, September 18th, 2024, and the time is 9:05 a.m. A quorum is present, and General Counsel will record each committee member who is in attendance. So, let's everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the American and Texas flags.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee. One state. One.
Can we get Director Martha Lee Whitten to do a invocation?
Dear God, your word says to enter your gates with thanksgiving. Today, we praise you for all the blessings that you've bestowed upon us, for the beauty that you created, for the joy that you've put in our hearts, for your grace and mercy that you pour out to us without question that we so do not deserve. Your word also tells us to pray about everything. So we humbly come before you today, Lord, to pray for our country. We pray that good will win over evil, that your people will be strong and powerful and stand up for what is right. There are many things that we will not understand, Lord, before we meet you face to face. So we pray that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Protect our state, this organization, and all the people that we serve. Help us to be good stewards of the resources that you've entrusted to us. In Jesus' name, we pray all these things. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Stand up. Stand up.
Bobby. There he is.
If anybody'd like to speak during public comment, you got to see the call for an item. Please sign up.
Meeting room. And we have none. And so we'll go on to our next part is to approve the committee meeting minutes from last time.
Second.
We have motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. I guess we'll go straight into the basic condition update. Is that going to be Kelly? Thanks, Kelly Payne.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chair Timmerman, Chair Martine, and board members. We'll walk through the slides today. Oh, went too far. Okay. So this is the drought monitor that we have been showing comparing last year to this year on this date in 23. And as you can see, 23 was really a lot of that maroon level 4 drought. 97% of the state in 23 at this time was in some level of drought or abnormally dry. And if you look to the right, this was last week, 60% of the state was in some level of abnormally dry or drought, but our basin was pretty clean. And so this next slide kind of shows a close-up of that. And as you can see here, there's a little bit of the abnormally dry, which is the yellow color in southern Gillespie County and northern Fayette and Colorado counties, and then just a little bit in the tip up there on Pecan Bayou Basin. But the rest of the rest of our basin is drought-free according to this tool, And I will remind you that we're still in the midst of a hydrologic drought. This doesn't take into account the state of the lakes or anything water supply related, but it sets a good tone for if we can get some more rain coming in here, the basin we should have some reaction and some runoff and get some more water into the lakes. Any questions on any of that?
Sure like the looks of it.
It looks better, yes, sir.
Sure is a much better map than a year ago.
Yes, sir.
And by the way, I think that dark stuff, I don't think that's maroon. I think it's like burnt orange.
Is it? Okay.
Bad drought.
It's my
I think it's burnt
glasses
orange.
that make it look, yeah.
It's like magenta.
I'm with you.
I like that word.
So here's a plot showing the water by month flowing into Lakes Buchanan and Travis. And we had a good run in May, June, and July with flows, pretty good flows. And then August slowed down a little bit. If you'll recall, it was dry and pretty hot during August. We had 11,727 acre feet, or about 20% of the long-term average that flowed in. But then at the beginning of September, kind of end of August, beginning of September, we got a little bit of rain. And Lake Travis actually rose about 2 feet and collected a little over 22,000 acre feet kind of the 1st of September. So we came out of August and got a little bit of rain, and that's probably why that drought monitor chart looks so good. That's kind of where the rainfall fell up in the Llano Basin. And this shows the medians. Median kind of similar story as the averages for August. It was a low month. The August inflow was about 50% of the long-term median, and this figure kind of shows that, like the previous one, May and June and July got some rains, and August we got back into that heat dome and hot dry spell. Here's a comparison of the combined storages of Lake Travis and Buchanan compared to the drought of record. And as you can see, as of September 1st, we were almost 436,000 acre feet more than we had at a comparable point of the drought of record. So it's been an improving summer for water supplies, and that has bought us some time to look forward maybe to the spring, getting us more inflows and getting closer to full. So here's the projections for combined storage. As of September 1st, we were at a little over 1.1 million acre feet. And as of this morning, we were at 1.12 million acre feet, both about 56% full. And as you can see on the plots, we're heading into that time of year where folks quit watering their yards. The yard watering kind of goes dormant, and use levels out. So those lower values on the 99th and the 90th percentiles are pretty flat, just a little bit of a downtick, and we do have some improvement in the 25th percentile. An update on Garwood, they've finished up first crop. To date, we have 12,853 roughly acres of second crop contracted, and a little over 4,800 acres of supplemental.
Did we use stored water?
We used a little bit of stored water in August, yes, sir. Just a little bit. So if we go forward here, this is the projections for lake levels at Lake Travis. As you can see, on the low end, it's pretty flat, like we talked about with the storage, combined storage. We're going into a time where the demands aren't quite as high because we're not using water outside as much. On September 1st, we were at 640.69 as a water surface elevation, and those 2 feet came in. As of this morning, we were at 642.64. So we've kind of maintained that 2 foot rise that we got at the beginning of the month. Similarly to Buchanan, Buchanan was at 1,005.4 at the beginning of the month, And as of this morning, we were at 1,004.93, so about a half a foot there. And as you can see here in the plots, we're in a position in our management of the water supplies where we're drawing a little bit more of the supply from Buchanan, so it's got a little bit more of a downward tilt than Travis does. And as the lakes, as we move forward, we'll adjust that when it's time to do that. Any questions about any of the projections? Not going up as fast as I'd like, but they're definitely not going down as dramatically as they were last year.
So I think I asked this last month, but I mean, at some point, as far as what was the answer, and I don't remember it, as far as adding the yield on the Arbuckle on the end of the term. And does it or does it get added into this projection? If we are going to fill it at least, or fill it one time by the first of the year.
Our buckle supplies will get added in once it's operational, declared operational, or testing is complete, and then we'll have to figure out.
We're not going to make an assumption until it's actually.
Correct.
That's
correct.
what you're saying. That's a good answer. Okay.
Yeah.
And we're working internally to kind of figure out how to show that in these projections and things, how to demonstrate what's going on at
So we're
Arbuckle.
not going to count our eggs before they're hatched, right?
Yes, sir.
That's correct.
Thank you, Steve. You're welcome.
So here's a comparison of lake levels. So this time last year, we were at 847,725, and this September 1st, we were over 260,000 acre feet more at 1108,546. We still seem to be hanging out in this INSO neutral phase out in the Pacific. If you'll recall, when we talked in June, all the forecasts were that August, September, we were going to go to a La Nina. And then we came back in August and it was, okay, September, October, we're going to go into a La Nina. Well, now we're not in September and it's October, November. The cooling of the Pacific has been really slow and much slower than the forecasters anticipated. But they do still think that we'll go into a weak El Nino in the next couple months, and that'll persist. La Nina in the next couple months, and that'll persist through the winter. The precipitation outlook for the fall really is low as well. The outlook for September shows increased odds that we'll average above normal across the coastal plains. Haven't seen that yet either. But there's no real clear trend for the middle and upper basins. And the outlook for October through December shows increased odds that will be below normal for the region. And then the temperature outlook for September through December shows an increased odds that the temperature will average a little above normal. So that's all signals of a La Nina. Any questions for me? No? Okay, thank you.
I think it's interesting that INSO neutral was more beneficial to the basin in terms of improved basin conditions than what El Nino was.
That's very interesting.
Just, I mean, we talked to you guys about these El Nino, La Nina, and there's statistics that go behind that and what we are likely to see, but at the same time, it lets you know that nature behaves how nature behaves, and sometimes we get events like what we got this summer.
I was going to ask you, in fact, July and August, that was kind of an anomaly we talked about the other day.
Yeah,
Just a minute, right?
yeah. It's what we saw in July was very significant from the perspective of you just don't see that in July very often. I mean, it has happened. It's not without precedent, but it's not something that you expect, statistically speaking. And so when you have that type of benefit to Travis in particular, which was very stressed at the time that we received that, it's really welcome. It's a welcome surprise.
Well, another interesting thing is they were predicting the worst hurricane season in decades, and see how that's worked out.
There's still time.
Yeah, we still have a month and a half.
We're waiting.
On the eastern side of the state, and of course Louisiana and Arkansas, that they did see some of that.
Well, these updates on the weather are very, very good. I really enjoy it when Bob Rose comes and gives us an update. We do that on a more.
Absolutely. I think we should just go ahead and make that part of our water ops meeting ongoing. We'll just add that to Bob. It would be a truncated version perhaps, but at least anything that he sees in the future and what we're seeing from a LCRA basin, and then maybe a statewide standpoint. So I think that's a great idea, Mr. Crane, and we'll go from there.
Well, we do provide Bob updates every month.
But we'll get Bob to.
Yeah.
Do
Gotcha.
that, yeah.
Instead of the poor man Bob, we'll get
Yeah.
the real Bob.
Yeah.
And we're going to tie his bonus to his accuracy.
Oh.
You know, that could get expensive for both sides. Because.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, me too. So if he's really, really right or
He's
really,
really
really
good.
wrong, I want to be really like wrong but get a lot of rain.
Yeah.
And then we like win-win. And I can give him a hard time. And I've actually done that to him
Point.
before.
Yeah,
So
well,
Could go both
I could
ways.
be
That
no-
answers our question.
exactly.
Yeah, that'd be nice to Bob. I've let up on him.
Well, we'll add that because I think after Kelly does kind of what we've seen and the volume we've had, the inflows and the Monica's going to go through, I think having Bob talk about what we're seeing and what I love about his presentations are so extraordinary is he has such a data set of the 7 or 8 kind of international and national forecast associations and groups and gives you that overlay like, this is what everybody thinks. This is kind of where the math plays out. It shows us maybe where the future could be. So I think that's a really nice idea. We can add that to what we're doing.
I vividly remember this meeting 11 years ago, and I'm sure Chair Timmerman and Director Martine do as well. And it strikes me, we're sitting here kind of high-fiving when our lakes are a little over half full, but that's how much better off we are right now than we were back then. And for the benefit of the newer members of the board, Tim, refresh my memory, we were somewhere approaching 650,000 acre feet of combined storage, if I'm correct. Isn't that right? Back then?
I think that's about right.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a very good meeting. I'll tell you what, going into the dry season, not much prospect of rain and lakes like that. And we were on the verge of having to do some serious things that we didn't want to have to do. But for people watching, wondering why we're kind of elated to have the water we got, even though our lakes are a long way from being full, it has been a lot worse. And we're in great shape compared to where we were back then.
Yeah, Bobby, that's a very, very good point. And had we not had this 435,000 acre feet increase, we would be facing a far different situation this fall.
Yeah, when we briefed y'all in the spring, we predicted that we could reach 600,000 acre feet about this time.
Right.
If we'd have stayed in the conditions we were in without any kind of inflows. And he brings up a really good point in that we're all kind of comparing against that historic period. And if you recall, that slide is I guess it's the 5th or 6th slide that we have that's in there that compares the two. You can see that dip, that bad spot in roughly 2013 when it got to the lowest that we had. And when we, as a staff, we keep an eye on that. It's a reference point.
Absolutely.
Not a good reference point. It's a reference point.
All right, Monica Masters, I think we're ready for your presentation.
Thank you. So today I'm here to discuss 3 proposed water rate changes for calendar year 2025. The firm rate, which is for municipal, industrial, recreational, and landscape customers. And then the Gulf Coast Industrial Water Rate Delivery, which we have 2 industrial customers in the lower basin. And then the distribution rate for our temporary customers. So water rates are set for a calendar year, and we'll have an agenda item in October requesting the board to approve all 3 of these rate changes. First, we're going to talk about why we need to make these rate increases and how we derive those rates. And then we'll talk about industrial distribution rate and then the temporary. So just a note that today we're not going to talk about the ag rates. We'll come back, Kelly will come back in a future meeting to go through all of those. So at a very high level, here are some of the primary reasons for our proposed firm rate increase. Water services will have a large capital program over the next several years as we continue to develop new water supplies and upgrade our water supply dams. Most of these expenditures are debt financed, causing increasing debt service requirements. And in addition, overall costs are increasing. Labor, our outside consultants, we've heard it, everything is kind of going up. There will also be a continued need for greater conservation measures and other initiatives. We want to do some more studies. There's just many things that we want to do in the next few years. So also looming that we have to remember in 2035 period is that significant portion of the Arbuckle debt service will be included in the firm rates. It is not prudent for LCRA to wait for this cliff to occur, requiring an immediate large rate increase. So they're not hitting yet, but they're in the next 10 years. So a brief history of our firm rate. Prior to 2015, LCRA's use rate for our firm customer was $151, which is represented here in the green bars. In 2015, we joined quite a few other utilities who implemented a one-year firm drought rate, which is shown here in the yellow. We had interruptible curtailment in effect during 2012 to 2015. And so our $151 went up to $175 for 2015. After that, we reduced the rate down to $145 beginning in 2016, which you can see in the blue bars. And that set in motion the plans which we created the rate stabilization fund so that we could reduce our chance of having to do an interim rate like that drought rate that we had to do in the past. We built the rate stabilization fund to $19.7 million. It's basically enough to cover 3 years of fixed Gulf Coast and lakeside costs. We've been utilizing these funds to cover Gulf Coast and lakeside costs during this recent curtailment. We've been stable at 155 since calendar year 2022. And if the board adopts the proposed new rate of 165, LCRA will have increased the firm rate by an average year-over-year percentage of 0.6% since calendar year 2011, or basically 15 years ago, which is not enough to keep up with inflation, let alone our increasing debt service.
Yeah, I would also like to point out, just in the last, 4 years, we've had 20% inflation, from 4 years ago, and to do what we're doing, all the new projects that we're working on, it's phenomenal that we've been able to keep our rate increases so low. I mean, it's a testament to the staff here and the organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we take very seriously the being financially prudent and thoughtful around this. Is real money. And want to make sure we're deploying this capital in a smart way. And I believe you look at the chart historically that Monica showed, that any organization that can look at these kinds of numbers over the period of time we've had should be very proud. And our team has done a great job. At the same time, we talked about our need to support ongoing operations and have a rate stabilization fund and kind of manage this where we don't have sticker shock on the rate side, and I think we've done that effectively under the board's direction. So thank you.
Well, it also prevents us from having to jump around, go low, go high. And it helps our customers tremendously because they've got expectations of, or they know where their rates are going to be, as opposed to just moving around quite a bit based upon year to year. So the rate stabilization fund is a very good idea.
It's worked out well, and I think it's avoided some of that volatility. And we've had, John has led with the rest of the team very good meetings with our customers over the years, and they have a sense of their rates have gone up because they've got the same inflationary pressures. We're just an input as far as the overall retail rate, but we take it very seriously. We don't try to create sticker shock to the best of our ability of rate design and how we respond to that.
That's one of the things that our customers really impressed upon us in that kind of 2014, 2015 time period when we came out of that drought rate, was to try to create some stability and some reasonable expectations about what rate trajectory is going to look like going into the future, and I think we've been able to provide that.
John, when we
When did you say we're gonna go over the interruptible rate?
So we'll do that later on this fall in terms of the briefing part, and then the board considers it right before the holidays, and we send it out for comment so that the ratepayers can have a chance to comment on it, and then we'll come to you in January and adopt it.
If it's possible, I'd like to see a chart like that on the historical rates as they've gone up on
Yes, sir.
interruptible water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then for context as well, as we've said, the 155 has been able to create the ability to cover the delta. We don't have rates at all coming on ag. So it keeps our operations going in those districts where we don't have revenue coming in, which is kind of the win-win you've had off of that, because it's important to have that. So as we walked into the rates, you'll see on the ag side, you've got to understand between the rate stabilization fund and the ag reserve fund, we've been covering the criticality of keeping those operations ongoing. So as you walk into the rate, you'll see that, you'll go, wow, that's gone up. At the same time, we've never had full cost recovery in this 8-year kind of window of time.
Granted.
So context is kind of as we go through that. We'll have that for you for that. You bet.
One other comment, if you look at all the work that LCRA is doing on our dams and keeping them up to date, to be able to have this kind of a rate structure, and I'll also point out our largest customer, water customer, is not contributing into our funds, into our revenue sources. So, this is pretty phenomenal, and I think it's just a testament to the organization of all the things that we're doing with the dams, with all the rehabilitation projects we're working on currently, and over the years, and still be able to keep these rates, I think is phenomenal.
Yeah, I think we had this slide last month, Kelly, correct me, it's north of $200 million over the kind of 12 to 14-year window. So that ongoing, we need somewhere in that $15 to $20 million range, depending on the project. And between the rehab project, the new gates, taking care of the rebar issues we've talked about and what's going, it really had, these are old houses. Y'all have heard me say that for years, but these are old houses. We got to keep them in. You got to put stuff in there to keep them operational because we can't rebuild them. We don't have a chance to get a do-over. So taking care of those, the work that Kelly and the team doing that is really critical. It is critical infrastructure, and it's what keeps the system operating, and I appreciate that because we're doing a great job with that. And the last bullet that Monica had, we're looking to fund new water supply projects. So this revenue allows us to go design, engineer, acquire assets as needed to go do that, and look at where we're going to go with that. So as y'all have charged us with the next level of 100,000 acre feet, that's part of the story as well. So it embeds all those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's also, I have to call out Jim Travis and his team have done a fantastic job in terms of their support for our business unit. And when we have, in terms of managing our short-term debt with the instruments that we have through commercial paper and short-term debt, and then when we have tranches of that when LCRA goes out and does a long-term debt issuance, they've been able to get us very favorable terms for our debt. So that's a big driver for us.
Okay, so as a brief recap for our firm rate setting process purposes, our costs are divided into the following cost categories. River management, which is our O&M expenses for the water supply system, and this includes water supply planning, the hydromet system operations, water conservation, water scheduling and releasing, dam safety and maintenance, and then many more. Firm pays for most of these expenses, and the remainder is paid by the Gulf Coast and the Lakeside interruptible customers. For water debt obligation, this is what we were talking about, represents our debt related to existing and new water supply and our flood control assets. And then under other adjustments, this includes things like our firm cash funded capital, and then our offsets for firm revenue from unique contracts such as the City of Austin Lake Travis diversions and STP nuclear power. So let's look at the specifics, how our firm rate is derived. Consistent with prior year's rate making, we start with a test year of calendar year of FY 2024 actual results, which is our latest fiscal year that we've completed. We then make any known and measurable adjustments to the FY24 actual results. And for the calendar year 2025 rate projections, the primary adjustments are for labor increases, primarily market adjustments, as well as for any open positions or new hires. There's also an increase for benefits, medical, pension, those kinds of things. And then other adjustments to reflect market increases in outside services, which would be like a lot of our engineering fees and our consulting firms. So now let's look at our cost categories.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So cost for developing new water supplies, what category would that cost go under?
River management.
River management?
Yes, sir. In terms of the engineering and the development of that, once it became a capitalized project, right now the capital for firm water supplies is all in a separate bucket that's covered 100% by the firm customers.
So from this chart, you can see that our river management costs are up by $2.2 million, mainly due to increased labor, outside services, and our enterprise increases. And enterprise increases will include like our increased IT and cybersecurity, risk management, physical security, and then lower capitalized enterprise costs. Outside services, over the next 2 years, we're proposing a new water billing system. The one we're using now is kind of outdated and it's just not working like we would like it to. So we are looking at a new water billing system. And then we've always got a pot in there for legal costs, outside legal services. So labor includes known and measurable for open positions, new hires, a base pay increase, and then market adjustments. So river management costs, as we talked about, are allocated between firm and interruptible according to the relative water availability during the 2 historic drought periods per the 2020 Water Management Plan. And that allocation is 78.7 to firm and 21.3 interruptible. So this chart shows you that allocation between the two. So it is important to note when we talk about our water debt obligation that this does not include Arbuckle, and that is currently being paid by our Resource Development Fund. So from here, you can see our total water debt obligation for calendar year 2025, $8.949 million.
Director Crane, I need to clarify that question, the answer to that question. New water supply projects are capital projects, and as we do capital projects, they're a part of the capital plan. So when we adopt our budget for the year, they're a part of the capital plan. Those are covered, the expenses for those are covered with short-term financing, commercial paper financing, that is not paid out of river management. That's a part of the debt service that we do in terms of that short-term debt payment. And then when they're rolled into a larger long-term debt project, it would go into the long-term debt pool that we have within the system. So, and the firms pay for that.
And then the firm rate picks up the cost profile. So it moves from short-term, we hold it there, and then when it goes to long-term after capital, this rate structure we're just showing is going to pick up the method behind that.
So as I was looking at the river management cost outline that they had there for you, those costs are not in that river management pool, they're in the capital.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yep, this slide here, 100% to firm. So then we have other adjustments, which also is 100% to the firm customers. River Management can fund $9.6 million of its capital program with current period revenues. And this equity funding represents 21% of the total $45 million projected capital program. And this helps us avoid long-term debt and coverage charged in future rates. So now we'll take a look at the denominator part of that firm rate equation, which is the billing units. And this slide shows the largest 16 firm customers in terms of total billing units. And these 16 customer represents about 80% of our total. As you can see here, from the billing units are comprised of the water used, which is column B, plus the reservation component, calculated as half of the difference between water reserved, column A, and water used, column B. A little math here early in the morning. So the total calendar year 25 firm billing units are 197,000 and some change acre feet. This is an increase of 11,228 acre feet from our firm billing units used in calendar year 2024. And here are some of the reasons that we're projecting an increase. We signed that new HIF USA agreement in the lower basin, increased use at Cedar Park and Leander, MAQ increases at Marble Falls and Travis County WCID 17, and then the new Travis County WCID number 10 contract. Our use projections are primarily developed using a 3-year historical average actual use, and expect for some municipal customers where clear year-over-year growth in use has occurred, which at Cedar Park, Leander, Pflugerville, we just assume that they're going to continue to grow. So then you put all those charts together, and that gives you the proposed firm rate calculation of $165 an acre foot, which is a $10 increase.
Monica, I have a question. You've got it in this chart on page 9. We've got all the different cities and different municipalities that use water. Where would the city of Austin, I mean, obviously the city of Austin would be at the top of the list, but what is their use annually?
Oh,
Well,
Just curious. Just approximately. We don't have to have an exact amount.
I want to say it was,
it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
I want to say last year's usage was 160-something thousand acre feet. Because this is broken down into like all their different uses. Their municipal usage alone was just under 100,000 acre feet, and that's not counting the other uses that they have. So
Okay.
they have multiple tranches of water that make up the.
So probably about 160,000 acre feet.
170.
170.
170, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess my point is if they would be included in the, in our billing units, these numbers would be drastically different.
Yeah, if you looked at the total firm billing units of 133
Right.
or 197, if you want to add that up and you add that to the 170, you get perspective on the math real quick.
So
100,000 municipal, then you add other stuff to it. So you're almost half of the total for that. Yeah.
well, and if you let that flow through the numbers, our billing, our rate would be less than half of what it is today.
Correct.
So just wanted to point that out.
No, I mean,
And it
I would
was,
also like to point out that deal was made in 2000. So nobody here had a chance to vote on it.
what's the term of that agreement?
that's a very,
Forever.
That's what I thought.
it's,
Yeah.
it's,
It's the
We
best
have-
kind of
It's a very good
contract
point.
you can make.
Do we have any other?
Forever. On the other side, yeah, it's forever.
I'm thinking Foghat free ride.
Yeah.
In my head.
but I think it's important to point that out.
But
any other
the flip
deals?
side of that though is, and this, we don't think they'll ever at least reach this in our lifetimes as of right now. There are triggers involved where if they get to a certain trigger point and sit there for a while, they then go to full rate. But that is not likely based on utilization and technology and their conservation efforts. And in all seriousness, some of the efforts they made actually conserve water because they don't want to reach that rate. So they have pressure on themselves to not reach that mark. Because as long as they stay below that, sit there for a while, they're conserving water, which is a good thing for the system overall as well. So it is kind of They paid up front. They gave us, I think, $100 million.
$100 million.
We're able to acquire water rights with that. At the same time, there's a lot of pressure on them to not ramp up to a higher level because they do not want to pay the full freight.
They go over 201,000 acre feet 2 years in a row, then they pay for their firm rate for water over 150,000 acre feet of use. And Greg Graham can correct me if I got that wrong, but I don't think so. And they currently do pay for what they take out of Lake Travis for Plant 4. They pay a reduced rate for that. So there is an exception to that agreement, and that the Plant 4 agreement has a standalone piece for what they take for that Plant 4.
Because that was not grandfather, that was post.
Correct.
Yeah.
If memory serves me correctly, didn't at one time they reserve quite a bit more water and pay a reservation fee in the past?
Not advised. That would have been pre the deal that we have right now. I think there was a whole series of contracts that led up to the contracts that we are under right now that had different provisions with respect to reservation rate. And it's a blended thing because the corpus of what they depend upon is run-of-the-river water rights that the city of Austin owns. And in effect, what they've done with us is they've contracted for water from the Hina Lakes to back up their run-of-the-river water rights to provide the amount of water that the city of Austin needs.
Okay.
2000.
99, 2000.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
99,
99 or
2000.
2000, yeah. And we leverage that to buy stuff. We bought stuff with that. We bought a lot. And they don't pay anything, and that's frustrating because of the growth profile, but at the same time, they hit those numbers, and we've talked about they will pay something over the 150. But I don't think we'll ever see that in the near future. They're very in a good way, incentivized to conserve. But it makes the balance, to the chairman's point, they're not paying the freight off that. They've prepaid that lump sum, and they're kind of,
Yeah, it allowed the LCRA to cash fund some purchase of some water rights, such as the Garwood water right, the Pierce Ranch water rights, some of those water rights that had we financed those, they would have been built into these rates, and these rates would look very different.
yeah.
Yeah, 201's the magic number. They try to stay, they have to go over 201,000 acre feet 2 years in a row before they trigger that.
Yeah.
So the impetus is to stay under 201,000 acre feet so that you don't trigger that. The delta between 150 and what they're using.
Yeah, so they get the 150 basically free still.
Right. Because it's their water.
It's their water, and then on top of that, they have not grown to look at that number to say you can't expect 5,000, 10,000 a year for the next few years to get there. It's just math not add up like that.
Martha Lee told us today that more people are leaving Austin than are coming, so.
Last year they said more people.
Where'd they go?
I don't know, but.
Georgetown, Cedar Park, Leander. But see, the flip side,
They went to Pflugerville.
Three of the four fastest growing communities in the United States are Kyle, Leander, and Georgetown.
Probably Austin.
So they left Austin, but they went within 30 miles away and, were able to buy a cheaper house and, do all the stuff people do, right? So they left.
Right, but not really.
They're still on the road. They haven't left the highway we're having
They
to
didn't
drive
left,
on.
they just-
Out to Leander.
Exactly right, yeah.
Just transferred.
They transferred.
All right, so now we're going to turn our attention to the proposed Gulf Coast industrial rate change for calendar year 2025. And this is a water delivery charge that our two industrial customers pay. They take water from the Gulf Coast Irrigation Canal System. Those two customers are OQ Chemicals and Underground Services Markham. We do have a third customer that's going to be coming online, HIF USA. They have not started taking water just yet. In addition to this delivery charge, these three customers also pay the firm water rate contract, just like any of our other firms. They would also pay this firm rate of $165 when we adopt it. So we'll walk through how that one is derived. So here is a look at the total cost, both for our agricultural customers and industrial customers in the Gulf Coast system. Overall, the Gulf Coast costs are up slightly from the calendar year 2024 rate. And as we just mentioned, there are 3 industrial customers who take or will take in the future water from the Gulf Coast Irrigation Canal System. So therefore, a cost-sharing allocation must occur between agriculture and industrial. And then we'll look at how those are shared. The allocation between Gulf Coast agriculture and Gulf Coast industry is based on projective relative water use for calendar year 2025 delivered to the end user. The allocation rate is 25.1% for industry and 74.9% for agriculture. And this compares to 74.3% ag and 25.7% industry for the calendar year 24 rate.
Is that based on gross revenues derived from both?
Gross usage.
Gross usage?
Yes, sir. Gross, so it would have been when we have water in Gulf Coast, this is how much water they use, and then we use the real-time previous stuff for the industrial customers. So,
Bear with me here. So like this year, there is no ag use.
correct.
So
You're having to go back to when they had water, when they had full service to say, okay, when you had full service, how much water was being used by the agricultural customers? And that cost allocation is based off of that. It's looking at next year, assuming that we would have service available for our ag customers next year. And then it bills the rate based off of that. Yes, sir.
So note that our 2 industrial customers, and soon to be 3, pay for firm water diverted at the river, which is that top row in the table. A little bit about HIF USA, similar to the OQ Chemicals and Underground Services Markham contract, they will take water from the Gulf Coast Canal System. Once HIF USA begins taking water, which we're projected in sometime calendar year 2026, their volumes will be included in the allocation as well. Of course, this means more volumes will be weighted towards Gulf Coast industry, and then less will go towards Gulf Coast ag.
I have another point. So the rumor mill in Matagorda County is all these new industrial companies coming in. You're gonna need all this water. Are we gonna be able to supply that water with the system we have down there now, Phil?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Depends on
Okay,
how much and where.
Yeah, so what John said. So how much do you need? When do you need it? How often? What's your volumetric? Does it have to be treated somewhere in the process? Is there ability for reuse and recycle? I mean, you look at some of these manufacturing plants, they use 60 to 70% gets re-put through system. So the only one we know about is what we just got. And that's a big user.
We have the ability to be able to serve HIF.
Right.
To the extent that we have to make any kind of improvements in the system to be able to service these contracts, the part of what we build into the costs that get allocated to those firm customers is any improvements we have to make to be able to get them water. So,
They would pay for that, wouldn't they?
yeah, to the extent we had to do something to get that industrial customer some water, that would be a part of that. We had one, 3 years ago, where we had an improvement that we had to do that was billed to the customer.
Yeah, and I think between that, you'd have a direct bill for the improvement, and then you would look at the question you just asked Director Craig, which I think is really what we're working through philosophically right now. If you do have more large industrial users, how do you do the cost allocation shift? Because then you move more and more water to their utilization model. And I think that would change how we do, and at least start looking at how you treat those charges for taking care of the canals and O&M and how you view that. So those things, I've asked our team to go through that and start planning in case some of those things do happen, and then understanding where they need it, when they need it, how much they need. Arbuckle is a great resource for a part of that. That's the beauty of having that come online, and when we start counting it, to Director Cooper's question earlier, and I hope come December, we're like, hey, we're good. We started adding that to the overall portfolio, and someone shows up in Matagorda County or in Morton County and says, I've got something I want to do. how can we meet that? And then use our system for delivering to that. And then start building it based on that utilization is a one more additional revenue opportunity to spread those costs among various users that way. I think that gets to the ultimate win-win, so you're still able to deliver the product you need to ag when we have time, and time of plenty, we have water in the system, and you also have water utilizing Arbuckle. When you remember we built it, and the model we expected, Monica, I'm gonna get this pretty close to right, but it was about 50-50, ag versus industrial type use. That was kind of aspirational in the chart, and I think there's a reasonable chance if some of these big guys come in, we have a chance to meet that as far as delivery standpoint using Arbuckle that way.
Looks to me like, Phil, if even 25% of the rumored development happens, it's gonna be a tremendous market for our water.
I think that's right. And depending on, I mean, what we have in this state and what you have down there in particular is you have great geography, you have available land and resources, you have transportation assets that are close to Houston. And what you're trying to do down there, you haven't fully developed that out like you had north and east of there or northeast of there. So I think it's kind of the next untapped area of the state when it comes to what people can go do, and they need water, potentially.
Has Mitsubishi approached us at all? I mean, it's out there, isn't it? I'm
They've-
sure they have
they've
at
listed-
Clintonville.
We've heard from Mitsubishi, yes.
Okay, well, I mean, they've, all the land's optioned up to 5 years now, and they've opened up the third section of the salt dome there with the injection well, so.
The nerdy water questions will be along the lines of, what's the hydraulic capacity of the canals when
Yeah,
they're being
but
used on a
then-
12-month basis instead of seasonal basis, and to what extent that changes the dynamic on operations?
You can't do anything till it happens, but that would, I mean,
Yeah.
back to Joe's question, I mean, does the canal and then the underground pipe that we have that services the Clintonville, infrastructure there, is that, I mean, I guess the question is, you don't know till you know, I understand that, but I guess looking into the future, I don't know what kind of requirement they're looking, the size of footprint, is much bigger than what TIF is, but that means nothing to me.
Yeah, and I think that gets to, we have to know what their needs are directly. And
Right.
so then you look at the infrastructure associated with that, and your point, Mr. Cooper, is that can we get a delivery mechanism that requires either canals, or we have to work with them for infrastructure that makes it electric portable to the asset?
That part of what goes into their site selection process too, because as we have conversations with them and our personnel down in Matagorda County is very familiar with our infrastructure and what it can, what it's capable of, and working together with Monica's team on the engineering side, we can kind of go in and go, okay, based off of where you're proposing to locate this prospect, this is the logistics that would be involved with providing the amount of water that you say you need.
Yeah.
And we would calculate the losses that are baked into all of that, and then it becomes, well, what other sites are they looking at, and what logistical issues will they have with trying to obtain service for water from that? And so that enters into whether they choose to locate in that area or don't choose to locate in that area. So we have a lot of prospects that come in and get very high-level information from us, and then a subset of those may come back.
Yeah, like the bunch down at the
Yeah.
canal, yeah, well, I won't say that.
And I will say this too, because of the issue that Joe Crane just talked about with respect to the economic development prospect activity that's going on in that area and throughout much of the state of Texas, there's also alternative water supply sources that are being discussed, such as a desalination plant at that site.
Right.
With the idea of it being an industrial provider, specifically to create desal for providing industrial water to some of these entities that may be coming into Matagorda County, into the region.
And it really gets into that point of, is they look at a multi-billion-dollar facility of some sort.
Yeah.
What's the input that water is to that? Because that's going to cost you probably about 8 to 10x for that water before you ever get to transport per acre foot based on our price point. But having said that, if that's just an input you need and your return on investment gets to wherever it needs to be, and that's just an input you can move into that, it doesn't move the needle more and more than a percentage or two off your product line, or you do a blended kind of rate, somewhere hybrid off that, and you can recycle a part of it, then you may get to win. So those are all kind of scenarios we're able to work through. and talk to them. And what's taking place there is, like John said, we've had the conversation, we'll have it in the next round of the meeting. It's power, it's transmission, it's water, it's everybody needs something to go do what they need to do, and we're well poised. And the biggest concern I've got is not the ability to deliver it, it's time and the process to meet that expectation, whether it's a pipeline, it's transport, it's the canals being available, and how do we get that in a way where we can meet what people need? We can do just about anything, but is a time there to go get it done.
The quick turn stuff.
The quick turn, yeah, that's what's hard, and we're very nimble. I mean, I think we're as nimble as anybody in the country. Y'all have given us that ability to do that. We've got a great team, but it's still time.
Well, Phil, at the risk of being somewhat impatient, and I apologize for that.
Yes, sir. Back to my time point.
My wife says I can't spell the word. Can you spell it?
Could we have an update on where we are on alternative water supplies development in the next few
Sure.
meetings? Just,
Yes, sir.
I'd sure like to know where we are and what the projections are for bringing those.
Yeah,
online.
and I've got some things that, and the impatience is fair because I am too on this because, I'd like to have the thing on a bow right now. There are a couple of things we'll talk about in executive session when we do this next time that really become the inbox solution for us really quickly if we're able to pull it for a while. But at the same time, we're having meetings. We'll have one next week on some opportunities there as well. So we're working and meeting all the time, and a lot of it is predicated on how fast and when somebody needs the water, which is always a challenge John and I talk about is it's wet water versus paper water. What I mean by that is there's planning water. I'd like to have it so I can plan to it versus I need it today for drinking or for commercial use or industrial use. And if you need it today, that allows us to jumpstart pipelines and permitting and engineering and design. If you need it for planning, that's a lot harder because who's going to write the check for that up front, right, to get it done? And then you get the economics of, well, I may need it in 6 years, 7 years. You probably do, but I don't want to write a check until I'm there. And lots of reasons for that. I'm not picking anybody. It's just a fact of what happens if you're living in municipal governments or counties or even customers.
Who pays in the
and
end?
who's going to carry that note to go there? And we can do a really good dive for y'all and some of the things we're looking at, the contacts and the proposals we're looking at. We're in a couple of NDAs right now and trying to talk through all that and maybe some partnerships we're looking at as well.
Thank you.
You bet. You have any idea of that? Okay. You got anything to add to that? You've been in the meetings too. All right, great. Thank you.
Okay, so then based on that allocation between the two that we just talked about, here's how the cost would then be divided between ag and industry. And then putting all those numbers together, here would be the proposed Gulf Coast industrial rate for calendar year 2025, $87.52 per acre foot. And this is an increase of $2.47 or 2.9% from the current rate. So for comparison, the delivery rate for Gulf Coast agriculture for calendar year 25 is projected to be about $75.40 or less than this proposed industrial delivery rate. The primary difference in delivery rates is the fact that industry takes water for 12 months of the year, whereas ag only takes water for about 7 months. So that electric cost is higher than for industry. And finally, our last rate item, this rate is for temporary firm customers who take water from the irrigation canal system. And these customers are relatively few and relatively small volumes of water. Historically, the only customers have been in the Gulf Coast division. Therefore, only the Gulf Coast water delivery cost divided by the Gulf Coast ag billing units is used. The proposed rate increase of $1.49 per acre foot or 2%. And since all of the contracts under this category of customers have historically been in the Gulf Coast area, we have only shown this Gulf Coast rate of $73.90 from calendar year 2024. So $1.49 increase on this one. So going forward, we will send all of this rate information out probably later today, late this week at the latest, to provide all of our customers an opportunity to give us comments on one or all three of these rates. We plan to bring a board or 3 separate board agenda items back to you for approval in the coming months. And then these proposed rates would go into effect in January of 2025.
So the customers will all be noticed, and then we have an email list of people that have signed up over the last several years that when they wish to be notified about things like this, that go out for comment. And that's a pretty diverse group of stakeholders within our basin and interested public. And so we'll have those folks noticed at the same time that the customers noticed that these materials are available for their review and comment.
We let the firm customers know at our last firm rate meeting, our firm customer meeting earlier this year, that there would be a rate increase. Plus, we've been calling at least our biggest customers just to remind them that we were talking about it today and that it was forthcoming. So we're going to continue to reach out to all those folks just so they're aware of what we're doing.
Mr. Chairman, that's what we had to cover.
Thank you. We have no need
Just
to go to
happened to
executive
notice
session.
an article, excuse me, in our clips this morning. And I know we've all been wringing our hands a little bit at the prospect of these AI data centers and how much electricity they use. I was unaware of the fact they use as much, according to this article, that they use as much water as they do. And I suspect that some of these proposals have been pitched our way for power. And I'm just interested, if staff's got any comment as to where these people are also looking for power, what are their proposals for water use? The ones that have surfaced in our area.
So interestingly enough, most of the data center AI projects we're looking at are in our electric service territory, but not in our water basin territory. So that is someone else's challenge. I got enough going on with our part. So they use a lot of air cooling as well. I think it depends on the plant. And we've seen that, but we haven't had the inordinate demand on the water side yet so far, Director Lewis, as we've had on the power and transmission side, which has been pretty extraordinary, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you got that, John?
Yeah,
Thank God.
Pretty tight-lipped about what their technology is and what their uses are, so we don't, it's really, until you get under close hold discussions with them, it's not until then that you really have a good sense of how much water they're needing, whether it's for AI or whether it's for any of these other chip fab plants, whatever. You don't really know what it's hard to generalize what their needs are because they're so proprietary in the things that they do that they tend to range quite a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the Water Operations Committee, and the time is 10:08 a.m.